Welcome to Night Lesson. Relax and learn along the way. Intro. Welcome to the ancient civilizations of the Americas. Good evening and a warm welcome. Find a position now that is completely comfortable and relaxed for you. Gently close your eyes and take a deep, slow breath in and out again. With each breath, let the tension of the day fall away from you. The sounds of the outside world slowly fade, making way for an inner silence, a place of tranquility and peace. Imagine you are standing on the shore of a still, endless ocean of time. Each wave that gently rolls onto the beach is a century, each grain of sand a life lived. Tonight, we embark on a journey across this ocean, a journey far back into the past, to the hidden and forgotten worlds of the ancient civilizations of the Americas. This is not a loud, hectic journey of facts and figures, but a gentle floating through millennia of human history, an immersion into the dreams and echoes of a sunken time. Our journey spans a vast continent, from the icy expanses of Alaska, where the first humans set foot on this land, to the windswept coasts of Tierra del Fuego at its southernmost tip. In between lies a world of breathtaking diversity. We will wander through dense, emerald green jungles, their canopies broken by the ruins of forgotten temples. We will breathe the thin, clear air of the Andes, where cities were built on the edge of the sky. We will feel the dry heat of endless deserts, where mysterious images were drawn in the sand for the gods. In the next 60 minutes, we will follow the tracks of hundreds of cultures that flourished and faded over a period of more than 15,000 years. We will meet the Olmecs, the mother culture of Mesoamerica, who left us their enigmatic, colossal stone heads. We will stand in awe before the pyramids of the Maya, the masters of time and the stars, who calculated the movements of the celestial bodies with incredible precision. We will glide through the canals of Tenochtitlan, the magnificent island capital of the Aztecs, which was once one of the largest cities in the world. And we will walk the dizzying paths of the Inca, who built an empire of unimaginable size in the steepest mountains of the world. This is an invitation to let go. Let yourself drift on the current of the narrative. There is nothing to do, nothing to achieve. Allow your mind to wander freely, to imagine the images, hear the sounds, smell the scents. Every word is a gentle brushstroke that brings a long-lost world back to life, just for you, in the quiet sanctuary of your room. Let the story become your lullaby, a melody from ancient times that will guide you safely and gently into a deep, restful sleep. Take one more deep breath, and as you exhale, our journey into the ancient civilizations of the Americas begins. Chapter 1. The First Settlers of the Americas. Our journey begins in a world that is scarcely recognizable. It is a world of cold, of ice, and of perpetual winter. We find ourselves in the last great ice age, about 15 to 20,000 years ago. Massive glaciers, miles thick and unimaginably heavy, cover large parts of the northern hemisphere. The sea level is far below today's, as infinite amounts of water are locked in the ice sheets. This circumstance creates a land bridge, a wide, dry plain where the cold waters of the Bering Strait rage today. This land bridge, called Beringia by scientists, connects present-day Siberia with Alaska. It is not a narrow footbridge, but a vast, subarctic land, thousands of miles wide, a barren steppe landscape swept by cold winds. Imagine small groups of people, wrapped in thick furs, their faces weathered by the wind. They are hunters and gatherers, families and clans, following the great animal herds. They hunt the massive woolly mammoth, the steppe bison, and the prehistoric horse. Their survival depends on their ability to read the cycles of nature, to interpret the tracks of animals, and to work together. They carry all their belongings with them. Their tools are made of stone, bone, and wood, their knowledge of the world passed down orally from generation to generation. Led by the most experienced hunters and wisest elders, they venture slowly, almost imperceptibly, ever eastward into this new, unknown land. It is not a planned departure, not a conquest, but a slow, organic migration that spans hundreds, perhaps thousands, of years. Researchers today debate the exact routes these first Americans took. Some suggest a coastal route. Along the Pacific coast, which was much wider then, people moved from bay to bay in small boats made of skin and wood. They lived off the riches of the sea: fish, seals, seabirds, and shellfish. Picture the scene: small boats navigating in the fog between floating ice floes, in the face of the massive, bluishly shimmering glaciers that reach down to the sea. Other scientists believe in an inland corridor, an ice-free passage that periodically opened between the vast ice sheets of North America, offering a path south for humans and animals. Whichever path they took, the result was the same. Humans entered a vast, untouched double continent. Over millennia, their descendants spread out, a wave of settlement that flowed slowly but inexorably southward. Each generation pushed a little further, discovering new valleys, new rivers, new forests. They adapted to an incredible diversity of climates and landscapes. They learned to live in the temperate rainforests of the Northwest, to survive in the arid deserts of what is now the U.S. Southwest, to penetrate the tropical jungles of Central America, and finally to climb the formidable heights of the Andes and reach the vast plains of Patagonia. These early peoples were masters of adaptation. They developed new hunting techniques for new species of animals. They learned which plants were edible, which had healing powers, and which were poisonous. And then, about 10,000 years ago, a revolution occurred that would change everything. In different places, independently of each other, people began to experiment with plants. They noticed that new plants grew from discarded seeds. They began to select the best and largest seeds and plant them deliberately. This was the birth of agriculture in the Americas. In the valleys of Mexico, an inconspicuous wild grass called teosinte was patiently bred over millennia until it became the plant we know today as corn. In the high Andes of Peru and Bolivia, people learned to cultivate the resilient potato and the nutritious quinoa. In the humid lowlands of the Amazon basin, the manioc root was domesticated. This development was slow, a process of trial and error over countless generations, but it allowed people to stay in one place. The need to constantly move around diminished. The first permanent settlements emerged: small villages of mud and wooden huts. One of the oldest and most fascinating of these sites is Monte Verde in southern Chile. Archaeologists there have discovered the remains of a small settlement that is over 14,500 years old. Imagine this place: a dozen simple wooden huts covered with animal skins, situated by a small stream. A communal tent where rituals were held. Hearths where people warmed themselves and cooked their food. The researchers found the remains of 42 different plant species, many of which came from over 200 kilometers away. They found stone tools, wooden lances, and even the footprint of a child, preserved for eternity in the soft clay on the bank of the stream. Monte Verde tells a story of a deep understanding of the environment, of trade or long journeys, and of a complex social life, much earlier than was ever thought possible. It is a silent testament to the incredible courage and resilience of these first pioneers, who made an entire continent their home and laid the foundation for all the great civilizations that were yet to follow. Let this image of the first settlers linger in your mind's eye, as they sit under a starry sky still free of our modern light, listening to the quiet sounds of a new, untouched world. Chapter 2. The Olmecs, the mother culture of Mesoamerica. As our thoughts still linger with the first settlers, let us allow the millennia to wash over us like gentle waves. Our journey now takes us to a warmer, more humid region, to the tropical lowlands on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. We are in the period around 1500 BC. Here, in the present-day Mexican states of Veracruz and Tabasco, amidst a labyrinth of rivers, swamps, and lush jungle, the first great civilization of Mesoamerica emerges, the Olmecs. Their name, in the later language of the Aztecs, means the people from the rubber country, a reference to the rubber trees that grew in this region. The Olmecs probably called themselves something else, but their true name has been lost in the mists of time. What they left behind, however, speaks a much clearer language of their power, their beliefs, and their artistry. Imagine you are wandering through the dense, humid jungle. The air is heavy with the scent of flowers and damp earth. Monkeys cry out in the treetops. Suddenly, the forest clears and you find yourself on a large, artificially created mound. Before you rise massive earthen pyramids and spacious plazas. You have arrived at one of the great centers of the Olmecs, perhaps San Lorenzo or, later, La Venta. These were not cities in the modern sense, but ceremonial centers, ruled by a priest-king elite who held power over thousands of people in the surrounding villages. The most impressive and enigmatic legacy of the Olmecs is their colossal stone heads. 17 of these monumental sculptures have been found to date. Imagine one of these heads. It is over 2 meters high and weighs up to 50 tons, as much as several elephants combined. It was carved from a single block of volcanic basalt. The face that looks at you is one of indescribable power and serenity. The lips are full and slightly parted. The nose is broad. The eyes have an almond-shaped, almost meditative expression. Each head wears a tight-fitting helmet, reminiscent of a football helmet, and each helmet is adorned with individual symbols. Scientists today largely agree that these heads are portraits of powerful Olmec rulers. Each head an individual, a king, immortalized in stone for eternity. The most incredible thing about this is the logistical masterpiece. The basalt for these sculptures comes from the Tuxtla Mountains, which are over 80 kilometers away from the main centers like San Lorenzo. The Olmecs knew neither the wheel nor did they have draft animals. Imagine the unimaginable effort. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of workers moving these massive boulders with ropes, levers, and sleds through difficult terrain, across rivers, and through swamps. And then the artistic achievement. With nothing but harder stones as chisels, the sculptors formed these lifelike, sensitive portraits. Some heads were deliberately buried over time, others mutilated and reused, perhaps as a sign of the end of a reign or a victory over a rival. But the Olmecs were more than just the creators of these stone giants. They were the mother culture of Mesoamerica, who developed many of the cultural and religious ideas that later civilizations like the Maya and Aztecs would adopt and further develop. They were likely the inventors of the famous Mesoamerican ball game, a ritual game with a solid rubber ball that often had cosmic significance. They developed an early form of hieroglyphic writing and the foundations of the complex calendar system that would define the region for the next 3,000 years. One stela, known as Stela C from Tres Zapotes, bears a date that corresponds to the year 32 BC in the later long count calendar of the Maya, one of the earliest dated inscriptions in the Americas. Their religion was deeply rooted in nature. A central motif of their art is the wer-jaguar, a hybrid creature of human and jaguar. The jaguar, the most powerful predator in the jungle, was revered as a divine being, a symbol of power, fertility, and the spiritual world. In countless jade and ceramic figures, we find depictions of shamans and rulers transforming into jaguars, a bridge between the human and divine spheres. The Olmecs were also masters of jade carving. This hard, green stone, which they imported from the distant Motagua River Valley in present-day Guatemala, was worked into the finest masks, ceremonial axes, and jewelry, all of which attest to an incredible level of craftsmanship. Their trade networks stretched for more than 1,000 kilometers, spreading their ideas and style throughout Mesoamerica. Around 400 BC, the Olmec culture began to decline. Their great centers were abandoned, their monuments toppled and buried. The reasons remain unclear to this day. Perhaps climate change led to crop failures. Perhaps there were internal conflicts or uprisings. But their legacy was not lost. The seeds they had sown took root. Their concepts of kingship, their gods, their calendar, their ball game, all of it lived on and became the foundation for the magnificent civilizations that were to follow. Let the image of this mysterious culture, of its silent, watchful stone heads, and its deep connection to the jungle world, linger with you as we slowly bid farewell to the humid warmth of the Gulf Coast and continue our journey through time. Chapter 3: The Maya, Masters of Time and the Stars. Take a deep breath and let us continue our journey deeper into the heart of ancient America. We leave behind the dry highlands and the floating gardens we visited earlier and dive into another world. A world of emerald green jungle, humid, warm air, and the quiet murmur of unseen rivers. Imagine you are standing at the edge of a dense rainforest on the Yucatan Peninsula. The air is filled with the songs of exotic birds and the rhythmic chirping of cicadas. The canopy above you is so dense that only scattered sunbeams reach the forest floor, dancing like golden coins on the damp leaves. Here, in this lush, vibrant landscape, between 250 and 900 AD, one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history blossomed, the Maya. This was their classic period, a golden age when their culture reached its highest peak. Unlike the centralized empires we know, the Maya were organized in a network of powerful city-states. Each state was like its own small kingdom with its own ruler, its own laws, and its own identity. Yet they all shared a common culture, religion, and, most importantly, a common understanding of the cosmos. Let us mentally wander through the dense jungle. Suddenly, the canopy clears, and a vision of stone rises before us. We have arrived in Tikal, one of the largest and most powerful Maya cities. Imagine a metropolis spanning over 16 square kilometers, housing up to 100,000 people at its peak. White, stone causeways, called sakbiob, connect the various complexes, standing out brightly against the dark green of the forest. Towering above everything are massive step pyramids, their peaks piercing the treetops as if to touch the sky itself. Temple 4, the tallest pyramid in Tikal, soars over 70 meters high. From its summit, the priests and kings would have overlooked a sea of green canopy, from which the tips of other temples occasionally protruded. The peaks of other sacred mountains and other, rival city-states like Calakmul. These pyramids were not just tombs for rulers, like those of Egypt. They were sacred mountains, replicas of the cosmic order on Earth. They were stages for rituals, observatories for the stars, and portals through which the gods could connect with the world of humans. Imagine a ceremony at sunset. The king, adorned with jade, quetzal feathers, and jaguar pelts, slowly ascends the steep steps. Below, in the grand plaza, the crowd has gathered, their faces lit by the warm glow of torches. Atop the temple platform, a sacred ritual is performed to renew the connection to the gods and secure the balance of the universe. Besides Tikal, there were other magnificent cities. In Palenque, nestled in the gentle hills of Chiapas, we find palaces of incredible elegance with delicate stucco reliefs that tell the history of dynasties. In Copan, in modern-day Honduras, stand steely, tall, carved stone pillars, so artfully decorated that they seem like stone trees in the jungle. Each of these cities was a jewel of architecture and art, a testament to the incredible ingenuity of its builders. But the true genius of the Maya lay not only in stone, but in their minds. They were obsessed with time. Not time as we understand it, a fleeting, linear sequence of seconds and minutes, but time as a cyclical, sacred force that permeates the entire universe. To understand and order this force, they developed some of the most complex and accurate calendar systems in the world. Let's dwell for a moment on their calendar. They had not just one, but several, which interlocked like the gears of a cosmic clockwork. There was the Hob, a 365-day solar calendar that regulated the agricultural year. It consisted of 18 months of 20 days each and a short, 5-day period at the end, which was considered unlucky. Running parallel to this was the Tzolk'in, the sacred calendar. It had 260 days and determined ritual life. Each day had its own name and number, and the combination decided the fate of a newborn child or the right time for a coronation or a military campaign. But above these two stood the so-called long count calendar. This was not a repeating cycle of one year, but a vast calendar that counted time since the mythical creation date of the Maya. It encompassed a cycle of 5,125 years. Just imagine that, a civilization that thought of its own existence not in generations or centuries, but in millennia. This great cycle ended on December 21st, 2012, which led many to false doomsday prophecies. For the Maya, however, this was not an end, but merely the conclusion of a great cosmic chapter and the beginning of a new one. It was a moment of renewal, not a moment of destruction. To calculate such vast periods of time, the Maya needed advanced mathematics. And here they made one of the most brilliant inventions in human history. Completely independent of the scholars of the Old World, they invented the concept of zero. Represented by a stylized shell, the zero was not just a placeholder, but a revolutionary idea. It allowed the Maya to use a positional system, similar to our decimal system, but based on the number 20. With just 3 symbols, a dot for 1, a bar for 5, and the shell for 0, they could write any number imaginable and perform complex calculations essential for their astronomical observations. And their observations were of breathtaking precision. Priest astronomers spent countless nights in special observatories, like the famous Caracol in Chichen Itza, a round tower with windows precisely aligned with the positions of certain stars at specific times of the year. They mapped the sky with the naked eye and infinite patience. Their most famous example is the calculation of the Venus cycle. They knew that Venus appears at the same position in the sky as the morning and evening star every 584 days. Their calculations over hundreds of years were so accurate that their deviation was only a few hours. For them, Venus was not just a planet, but the god Kukulkan, and its cycle was closely linked to war and rituals. The pyramid dedicated to him in Chichen Itza is also a stone calendar. Each of the 4 staircases has 91 steps. Multiply that by 4 and add the top platform, and you get 365, the number of days in the solar year. All this knowledge, their history, their myths, their astronomical data, was recorded by the Maya in a beautiful and complex hieroglyphic script. It is the only fully developed writing system of ancient America. For a long time, these glyphs were a mystery. Researchers could decipher the numbers and calendar dates, but the rest remained silent. It was not until the second half of the 20th century that the code was cracked. It was discovered that the script is a mixture of logograms, signs for whole words, and phonetic syllable signs. Suddenly, the stones began to speak. The stele and temple walls told us of the births, weddings, wars, and deaths of kings and queens, of alliances and betrayals. A part of their culture that is often misunderstood is the famous ball game, called pits. On stone courts found in every major city, 2 teams competed against each other. The goal was to pass a heavy rubber ball through a stone ring mounted high on the wall, without using hands or feet. But this was not a game for mere entertainment. It was a sacred ritual, a reenactment of the cosmic battle from their creation myth, the Popol Vuh. In it, the hero twins defeat the gods of the underworld in a ball game. The game on Earth, therefore, had deep symbolic meaning and often ended with the ritual sacrifice of players to nourish the gods, and maintain cosmic order. Blood sacrifice was also a central part of their spiritual practice. The rulers themselves would perform bloodletting, often from their tongues or ears, to offer their own precious blood to the gods. They believed this was necessary to strengthen the gods and maintain the cycles of life, rain, harvest, and the movement of the stars. It was an act of the deepest piety, a personal commitment of the king to his people and the cosmos. But around the year 900 AD, something strange happened. In the great cities of the southern lowlands like Tikal and Palenque, construction ceased. The last calendar inscriptions were carved in stone. The grand plazas slowly became overgrown with grass, and the population began to leave the cities. Within a few generations, these once vibrant metropolises were reclaimed by the jungle. This collapse of the classic Maya civilization remains one of the great mysteries of archaeology to this day. Was it a devastating drought? Was it constant warfare between the city-states that exhausted resources? Or a combination of all these factors? We do not know for sure, but it is important to understand that the Maya did not simply disappear. Their culture shifted north to the Yucatan Peninsula, where cities like Chichen Itza and Uxmal flourished for centuries more. And the people themselves, the descendants of the great astronomers, architects, and artists, still live in the same regions today. They still speak their ancient languages, practice a mixture of traditional and Christian rituals, and preserve the heritage of their ancestors in their hearts. As the shadows lengthen in the jungle and the ruins of Tikal sink into the last light of day, we slowly leave the world of the Maya behind. Their cities may have fallen into decay, but their intellectual and spiritual legacy, the invention of zero, the precise calendars, the complex script, shines on like a distant star in the night sky of history. Our journey, however, is not yet over. While the Maya were observing their cosmic cycles, a new power began to rise in the dry highlands of central Mexico. A power of pragmatic warriors and brilliant engineers who would build a city of unparalleled splendor on a lake. But that story awaits us in our next chapter. For now, let the silence of the rainforest and the whisper of the ancient stones wash over you as you gently glide onward. Chapter 4. The Aztecs, Warriors and Builders. Let us continue our journey through time and now turn our attention to a valley high in the mountains of modern-day Mexico. It is the 14th century, and a group of people who call themselves the Mexica are wandering through this land. They are searching for a homeland, guided by an ancient prophecy and the unshakable will of their god Huitzilopochtli. The legend that drives them is woven like a luminous thread into their collective consciousness. It says they will find their resting place where an eagle majestically perches on a cactus, holding a snake in its talons. Imagine this long, arduous journey, over generations, sustained by this one powerful image. And then, one day they see it. In the middle of the muddy, swampy Lake Texcoco, on a small, unassuming island, an eagle is perched on a prickly pear cactus, a rattlesnake writhing in its beak and talons. It is the sign. Here, in this seemingly inhospitable place, surrounded by water and reeds, their long journey ends. Here begins the story of the Aztecs and their wondrous capital, Tenochtitlan. Dwell on this image for a moment. A city born from the water. What at first seemed like an obstacle, the vast, shallow lake, became the foundation of their strength and ingenuity. The Mexica, now called Aztecs, were not just warriors, but above all, visionary builders and engineers. They began to reclaim the land from the lake, not through force, but through an ingenious agricultural technique known as chinampas. Imagine them weaving long, rectangular rafts of reeds and branches. These rafts, anchored to the lake bed, were filled with mud and sediment dredged from the bottom of the lake. Along the edges, they planted sturdy trees whose roots would eventually solidify the artificial islands. Thus, the famous floating gardens were created. But they didn't truly float. They were highly fertile, man-made land masses, crisscrossed by a network of canals that served as transportation routes and constantly supplied the gardens with water. On these chinampas, they could harvest up to 7 crops a year: corn, beans, squash, tomatoes, chiles, and countless species of flowers thrived here in an abundance that secured the survival and growth of the city. The air above Tenochtitlan must have been filled with the scent of blossoms and damp earth. Starting from the original island, the city grew. The Aztecs drove stakes deep into the lake bed to create a foundation for their buildings. They built wide dams and causeways that connected the city to the mainland and simultaneously regulated the lake's water level to prevent floods. One of these dams was a masterpiece of engineering, equipped with sluice gates to control the salinity in different parts of the lake. Not only did traders and warriors march across these causeways, but they also carried one of the city's most impressive achievements: an aqueduct. Over a distance of nearly 5 kilometers, this massive structure transported fresh spring water from the hills of the mainland directly into the heart of the city to supply the growing population. By the year 1500, Tenochtitlan had developed into one of the largest and most magnificent cities in the world. It is estimated that between 200,000 and 300,000 people lived here, more than in most European capitals of the time, such as Paris or London. The city was a marvel of stone and water, an urban mosaic of temples, palaces, markets, and homes, crisscrossed by canals on which countless canoes glided silently. Imagine the sight that greeted the first European visitors: a shimmering metropolis that seemed to rise from the water, its white temple pyramids gleaming in the sun. At the spiritual and geographical center of this urban wonder stood the Templo Mayor, the Great Temple, a massive structure, a step pyramid that rose almost 60 meters into the sky. It was not just a single temple, but a dual structure crowned by 2 shrines. One was dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun, painted in the colors of war, red and white. The other shrine belonged to Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility, adorned in the blue and white colors of water. This twin temple was the Axis Mundi, the navel of the Aztec world, a place where heaven, earth, and the underworld met. It was the heart that kept the cosmos in balance. And this balance, the Aztecs believed, was fragile. Their cosmology was marked by a deep sense of duty to the gods. They believed the sun, their god Huitzilopochtli, needed constant nourishment to continue its daily journey across the sky and to fend off the forces of darkness at night. This nourishment was Calchihuatl, the precious water, human blood. From this belief arose the practice of human sacrifice, which is so difficult for us to understand today. For the Aztecs, it was not arbitrary cruelty, but a sacred duty that ensured the survival of the universe. To procure captives for these rituals, they conducted the so-called flower wars. These were not wars of conquest, but highly ritualized conflicts with neighboring city-states, the main purpose of which was to capture warriors for sacrifice. The power of the Aztecs, however, was based not only on military strength and religious ideology, but also on a sophisticated political and economic system. Together with the cities of Texcoco and Tlacopan, they formed the so-called Aztec Triple Alliance. Although they began as partners, the Mexica of Tenochtitlan quickly rose to become the dominant force. Together, they subjugated large parts of central Mexico. A vast tribute system was established, which secured the wealth of the empire. Historical records, such as the Codex Mendoza, list in detail what the 371 subjugated cities and provinces had to pay. It was not just food like corn and beans, but also luxury goods: shimmering feathers of the quetzal bird, jade stones, gold, cacao, intricately woven cotton fabrics, and animal skins. This incessant stream of goods found its way to the largest market in the Americas, the market of Tlatelolco, the the sister city of Tenochtitlan. Imagine this place. On a typical day, up to 60,000 people gathered here to buy, sell, and trade. The market was perfectly organized, with each type of good assigned to its own section. Here you could find everything, from basic foodstuffs and pottery to rare herbs and medicine, to slaves and precious metals. The buzz of voices, the haggling of merchants, the variety of colors and smells must have been overwhelming. It was a vibrant center of commerce that reflected the economic power and immense reach of the Aztec Empire. Thus, this world existed, a complex fabric of faith, war, and trade, of water and stone, for almost 200 years in the Valley of Mexico. A civilization that had created one of the most spectacular cities in human history, sustained by a deep belief in the cosmic order and their role within it. But then, in the year 1519, something entirely new appeared on the horizon. From the east, across the Great Sea, came ships that the Aztecs described as floating mountains. On board were strange men with pale skin, beards, and shiny armor of metal, led by a man named Hernan Cortés. They brought horses, animals that had been extinct in the Americas for millennia, and that seemed like terrifying beasts to the Aztecs. Their arrival coincided with ancient prophecies that spoke of the return of the god Quetzalcoatl. This uncertainty and the technological superiority of the Spanish, especially their steel weapons and cannons, created an atmosphere of tension and hesitation. The ruler at the time, Moctezuma II, initially received the strangers with reverence and gifts, unsure whether he was dealing with gods or men. But the intentions of the Spanish were more earthly. They sought gold and power. What began as a cautious probing soon descended into mistrust, violence, and finally, a merciless war. After a siege that decimated the city through starvation and a smallpox epidemic brought by the Europeans, Tenochtitlan fell in the year 1521. The end of the magnificent city on the lake was sealed. But the story of the Aztecs does not truly end here. Their heritage, their language, their culture, and the memory of their incredible city live on, woven into the fabric of modern Mexico. The eagle with the snake on the cactus, the founding symbol of Tenochtitlan, now adorns the Mexican flag. And so the circle closes as we gently withdraw from the shores of Lake Texcoco and prepare to explore other paths of history. Chapter 5: The Incas, Masters of the Mountains. Our journey through time and across continents now leads us to a place of breathtaking height and seemingly infinite expanse. Let us mentally leave behind the dense, humid jungles of Central America and ascend, ever higher, into the clear, cool air of the Andes. Here, along the backbone of South America, stretched the largest empire the pre-Columbian world had ever seen, the empire of the Inca. Imagine a civilization that found its home not in gentle valleys or on sheltered coasts, but in one of the most extreme landscapes on Earth. The Andes, with their snow-capped peaks reaching into the steel blue sky, their deep, dizzying canyons, and their barren high plateaus, were the heart of this empire. The Inca called their land Tawantinsuyo, which in their language, Quechua, means something like the four parts of the world. It was a name that reflected their cosmos and their order. The empire was divided into four provinces or siyus, which radiated from the central capital and represented the known corners of their world. At the center of these four parts, at the navel of their world, lay the magnificent capital, Cusco. Imagine you are standing on a hill above this city, which lies at an altitude of 3,400 meters. The air up here is thin, each breath filling the lungs with a cool, almost tangible clarity. Below you, Cusco spreads out, an architectural marvel of stone. The buildings are not just built, they seem to have grown from the rock itself. Here, one of the most incredible skills of the Inca builders is revealed: their stoneworking technique. Let us pause for a moment and look at these walls more closely. They are made of massive, polygonal stone blocks, some of which weigh as much as several elephants. But what is astonishing is not just their size, but their perfection. There is no mortar between the stones, no grout. Each block was so masterfully carved and fitted to its neighbors that not even a knife blade can fit between them. The stones have many corners and edges, and yet they interlock like pieces of a three-dimensional puzzle. This technique made their buildings not only beautiful, but also extremely resistant to the earthquakes that are common in this region. The walls could shake and settle without collapsing. It is as if the Inca had learned the secret of flexibility and eternal stability from the stone itself. From Cusco, the heart of the empire, life pulsed through a network of arteries as impressive as the temples of the capital. This was the Great Andean Road System, the Capac Nan, which stretched for an incredible 40,000 kilometers. It was the backbone of the empire, holding together its vast expanse from the present-day borders of Colombia in the north to Chile in the south, a distance of over 4,000 kilometers. Imagine these roads. They were not wide highways for carts, as the Inca knew neither the wheel for transport, nor did they have large draft animals like horses or oxen. They were paths for people and their llamas, perfectly adapted to the topography. The paths ran in straight lines through desert plains, climbed steep mountain slopes in dizzying switchbacks, traversed high plateaus, and led over steps carved into the rock. Where deep canyons blocked the way, the Inca engineers proved their genius once again. They built suspension bridges of braided plant fibers that swung daringly over chasms more than 50 meters wide. Imagine what it must have been like to cross such a bridge, to hear the wind whistling in the ropes, and to see the rushing river far below as a silver ribbon. These bridges had to be renewed every year by the surrounding communities in a communal ritual, a tradition that has survived in a few places to this day. On these roads, there was a constant stream of people, traders, pilgrims, armies, and perhaps the most important actors in the empire's communication system, the chasca. These were relay runners who transported messages and small goods through the vast empire in a sophisticated system. Along the roads, small posts, called tambos, were built at regular intervals. A chasca would sprint the distance to the next post, hand over his message, often a memorized message or a quipu, to the next runner, who would immediately hurry on. In this way, messages could travel up to 240 kilometers in a single day. An incredible achievement in this rugged terrain, which ensured that the Inca ruler in Cusco was always informed about events in the most remote corners of his empire. And what about writing? An empire with 12 million inhabitants at the time of its greatest extent around 1530, with a complex administration, an army, and a huge road network. And yet the Inca had no writing as we know it. Not a single character, not a single hieroglyph. Instead, they had the quipus. Imagine a bundle of cords hanging from a main cord. The cords have different colors, are of different thicknesses, and at certain intervals, knots are tied. This was the information storage system of the Inca. The colors of the cords, the type of knots, their position on the cord, and the distances between them, all of this had a meaning. For a long time, it was thought that the quipus were purely numerical records for tax collection and censuses. Today, many researchers believe they were much more, perhaps even a form of three-dimensional, tactile narrative that could record genealogies, laws, or even myths. Only specially trained Quipikamaic, the masters of the quipus, could read and create them. With the fall of the empire, much of the knowledge for deciphering these knotted cords was lost, and they remain one of the great, fascinating mysteries of Andean culture to this day. To feed such a large population in such a demanding environment, the Inca developed another masterful technique, terrace agriculture. On the steep slopes of the mountains, where flat arable land was scarce, they built steps into the landscape, the Andes. Imagine entire mountains covered from bottom to top with these green, agricultural terraces. Each terrace had a retaining wall of stone, behind it a drainage layer of gravel, and above it fertile soil. This system not only prevented soil erosion but also created different microclimates at different altitudes, which allowed for the cultivation of an astonishing variety of plants. At altitudes of up to 4,000 meters, they cultivated hundreds of varieties of potatoes, quinoa, and corn, an agricultural achievement that secured the survival of the empire. The entire organization of this vast empire was based on a system of reciprocity and communal labor. The MTA was a kind of labor duty, where every able-bodied man had to provide his labor to the state for a certain period of the year. This collective effort was the force that built the massive roads, the temples, and the terraces. It was not a system of slavery, but a concept of community deeply rooted in Andean culture, in which everyone contributed to the well-being of the whole. At the head of this order was the Sapa Inca, the divine ruler. He was considered a direct descendant of the sun god Inti, the most important deity in the Inca pantheon. Religion and state were inextricably linked, and the sun cult gave the empire its ideological unity. And then there is the place that, perhaps more than any other, captures the imagination, Machu Picchu. The lost city of the Inca. Hidden on a mountain ridge, surrounded by even higher, mist-shrouded peaks, and with the wild Urubamba River flowing far below, this city remained hidden from the Spanish conquistadors. It fell into oblivion and was only rediscovered for the Western world in 1911 by the American explorer Hiram Bingham. Imagine walking through the empty streets of Machu Picchu, past the Temple of the Sun, the Room of the Three Windows, and the Intihuatana, the hitching post of the sun. Was it a royal residence, a sacred center, an astronomical observatory? Perhaps it was all of these things combined. The perfection of its architecture and its surreal location make it a place of deep, spiritual tranquility, a silent witness to the greatness of the Inca. But this great civilization, which had conquered the mountains, was to meet a sudden and tragic end. In 1532, the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro landed on the coast with a small band of only 168 men. The Inca Empire was weakened at this time by a war of succession between the brothers Huáscar and Atahualpa. Pizarro skillfully exploited this internal division. In the city of Cajamarca, he captured the victorious Atahualpa by a ruse. Despite an unimaginable ransom of gold and silver, the Inca ruler was executed in 1533. His death plunged the empire into chaos. The arrival of the Europeans, their superior weapons, and above all, the diseases they brought with them, against which the indigenous population had no immunity, sealed the fate of the Tawantinsuyo. The empire of the four parts disintegrated. The perfectly fitted stones of Cusco remained, but on their foundations, the Spanish built their own churches and palaces. The golden art treasures were melted down and shipped to Europe. The Quipus could no longer tell their stories. And so, the glory of the sons of the sun slowly faded. But their legacy has not disappeared. It lives on in the stone walls that defy earthquakes, in the terraces that are still cultivated on some mountain slopes, and in the descendants of the Inca who live in the Andes and preserve their language and traditions. The whisper of their history still blows with the cool wind over the high passes of the Andes, a silent melody from a time when people learned to live in harmony with the mountains and build an empire as majestic as the peaks that surrounded it. We let our gaze sweep over this imaginary landscape one last time before gently turning to new shores of the past. Chapter 6: Other Fascinating Cultures. Let us now continue our mental journey and gently move to other fascinating regions of the Americas, where other remarkable civilizations left their mark on the landscape and in the hearts of those who still learn from them today. Imagine us gliding across continents, from the majestic Andes to the vast deserts and lush valleys, discovering the stories of people whose creativity and endurance continue to amaze to this day. 6.1 The Nazca, Peru, 200 BC, 600 AD. Our first stop takes us to the arid coastal plains of modern-day Peru, a region that at first glance may seem barren and uninhabited, yet it holds a secret as old as time itself, one that only reveals its full splendor from a bird's-eye view: the Nazca Lines. Imagine soaring high above this vast, reddish-brown desert, and below you, shapes and patterns unfold, drawn into the desert floor with such precision that they are breathtaking. The Nazca culture, which flourished from about 200 BC to 600 AD, is primarily known for these gigantic geoglyphs. They are not small sketches, but true works of art of immense proportions, spanning hundreds of square kilometers. Some of these lines and figures can reach up to 300 meters in length. They were not simply laid on the surface, but were worked into the desert floor with amazing technique. The Nazca removed the dark, oxidized stones from the surface to expose the lighter soil beneath. The dry, windless environment of Peru has helped preserve these artworks for centuries, indeed millennia, a silent testimony to human engineering and spiritual devotion. Let's pause for a moment and imagine the diversity of these shapes. There are the figurative depictions: a majestic hummingbird, its wingspan measuring over 90 meters, a monkey with a spiral tail, looking curiously up at the sky, a spider so detailed that you can make out its 8 legs and mouth parts. Besides these animal figures, there are also stylized human forms, sometimes referred to as astronauts, as well as an infinite variety of geometric patterns: perfect trapezoids, triangles, rectangles, and kilometer-long, dead straight lines that run over hills and valleys without losing their course. The question of the purpose of these huge drawings remains a subject of intense research and speculation to this day. Was it a gigantic calendar that helped the Nazca determine the seasons and plan their agricultural activities? Some of the lines seem to be aligned with the points of sunrise or sunset at the summer or winter solstices, which would indicate a deep astronomical knowledge. Or did they serve as ritual pathways, along which processions took place at certain times of the year, perhaps to ask the gods for rain, which was so vital in this arid region? It is believed that the Nazca had an intense reverence for water and fertility, and there are theories linking the geoglyphs to their complex underground aqueducts, the so-called puquios, perhaps as symbolic representations of water veins or rituals for water collection. Another suggestion is that the lines were intended for deities who lived in the sky and could only see from above how the people on earth paid homage to them. The possibility that they were messages to the gods, or perhaps even maps of water sources or fertility rituals, stimulates the imagination and invites us to reflect on the deep spirituality and complex beliefs of this ancient culture that so tenaciously guards its secrets. 6.2 The Moche, Peru, 100 to 800 AD. Very near the Nazca, but a little further north along the Peruvian coast, another brilliant civilization developed: the Moche. Flourishing from about 100 AD to 800 AD, the Moche were a society of impressive artistry, engineering skill, and complex social structure. Their culture differed from that of the Nazca in its preference for monumental architecture and an incredibly expressive style of ceramics. The Moche were true masters of metallurgy. Imagine skilled artisans shaping gold, silver, and copper into elaborate objects. They mastered techniques such as electroplating, where thin layers of gold or silver were applied to copper, as well as the lost wax casting method to create delicate and complex forms. Their artworks include exquisite jewelry, ceremonial objects, and even weapons that were not only functional but also of great aesthetic beauty. These artifacts testify to a highly developed society with specialized craftsmen and a strong sense of the symbolism of materials. Even more impressive, however, were their massive structures, the so-called huacas. The largest among them is the Pyramid of the Sun, Huaca del Sol, a colossal structure made of adobe bricks. Let's pause for a moment and imagine the sheer size of this building. It is estimated that over 50 million adobe bricks were used in its construction. This was not the work of a few years, but the result of centuries of communal labor, which required a high degree of organization and unified leadership. Originally over 40 meters high and more than 340 meters long at its base, it likely served as an administrative and ceremonial center. Nearby is the Huaca de la Luna, the Pyramid of the Moon, which, although smaller, is famous for its astonishingly well-preserved, colorful murals depicting deities, rituals, and warriors, giving us a rare glimpse into the belief world of the Moche. Another hallmark of Moche culture is their artfully painted pottery. Their ceramics are not just vessels. They tell stories, provide insights into their worldview, and show a remarkable love for detail. Particularly famous are the so-called portrait vessels, which depict individual faces with astonishing realism, perhaps of rulers, warriors, or important figures. These vessels are so specific in their representations that one feels as if one is looking directly at people from over 1,000 years ago. Besides portraits, the Moche also depicted scenes from daily life, complex mythological narratives, bloody sacrificial rituals, and even erotic scenes on their pottery. The use of molds and vibrant pigments, combined with the characteristic stirrup spouts, makes their ceramics unique and unmistakable. Moche society was evidently hierarchically structured, led by warrior priests who held both religious and political power. Their impressive tombs, such as that of the Lord of Sippin, reveal an unprecedented wealth of gold, silver, and pottery, underscoring the power and richness of their elite. The causes for the decline of the Moche around 800 AD are varied and complex, likely including a combination of devastating El Niño events that led to extreme weather conditions and possible internal conflicts. 6.3 The Anasazi/Ancestral Puebloans, USA, 700-1300 AD. We now travel further north, across the vast landscapes of the Americas, to the southwest of the present-day United States. Here, amidst deep canyons and wide plateaus, we encounter the traces of another remarkable civilization, which we now call the ancestral Puebloans, formerly often known as the Anasazi. This culture, which flourished from about 700 AD to 1300 AD, is known for its unique and breathtaking cliff dwellings, built into the steep cliffs of the canyons. Imagine you are standing on the edge of a deep canyon, its walls illuminated by the sun in warm ochre and red tones. High up, in natural caves and overhangs that seem almost unreachable, you see elaborate stone structures. These are the famous cliff dwellings, true architectural wonders. The ancestral Puebloans were skilled builders who not only inserted these dwellings into the rock faces for protection from weather and enemies, but also integrated them harmoniously into the natural environment. One of the most impressive examples of this is Mesa Verde in present-day Colorado. Here you will find complex, multi-story settlements with hundreds of rooms, artfully constructed from stone and mortar. Imagine walking through the passages of Cliff Palace, the largest cliff dwelling in North America, with its approximately 150 rooms and over 20 kivas. Kivas are round, underground or semi-subterranean ceremonial rooms that played a central role in the spiritual life of the Puebloans. Their construction attests to a deep understanding of engineering and a tireless community spirit. These structures offered protection from the scorching summer sun and the icy winter winds, and at the same time were fortresses that blended seamlessly into the landscape. Another center of their culture was Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. Here, between 850 and 1250 AD, the Puebloans erected gigantic, great houses like Pueblo Bonito and Chetroquetl, which stood not in rock niches but on the canyon floor. These huge stone complexes could contain hundreds of rooms and dozens of kivas and were often astronomically aligned to mark important solar and lunar events. Let this idea sink in. A network of roads stretching for hundreds of kilometers connected these great centers, indicating a complex society with far-reaching trade relations and centralized organization. Chaco Canyon was likely a ceremonial and commercial center for the entire region. The ancestral Puebloans were also skilled farmers, growing corn, beans, and squash in this arid environment. They developed sophisticated irrigation systems and water collection techniques to secure their harvests. Their lives were closely tied to the cycles of nature and the sky, which was reflected in their architecture and ceremonial practices. Around the year 1300 AD, a sudden change occurred. Many of the large settlements in Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon were abandoned. The exact reason is not fully understood to this day, but archaeologists suspect a combination of prolonged droughts leading to food shortages, as well as environmental degradation and possibly social or political upheavals. It is important to understand that the ancestral Puebloans did not disappear, but migrated. Their descendants are the modern Pueblo peoples, who preserve their cultural traditions and stories to this day, reminding us that history is a continuous stream. The silence that now reigns in these ancient cliff dwellings invites us to reflect on the resilience and transformation of human societies. 6 Point for the Cahokia, USA, 600-1400 AD. Our final stop on this soothing exploration takes us even further northeast, to the fertile valley of the Mississippi, near present-day St. Louis. Here, in the plain known as the American Bottom, arose one of the largest and most influential pre-Columbian cities in North America, Cahokia. From about 600 AD to 1400 AD, Cahokia was a vibrant center of human life, which in its heyday, circa 1050 to 1200 AD, had more inhabitants than London at the same time. Imagine a sprawling city extending over several square kilometers, dominated by huge earthen mounds that touch the sky. Cahokia was the largest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico, and an amazing example of the complexity and urban character of the indigenous societies in North America. The heart of Cahokia was Monk's Mound, the largest earthen mound in North America. Let us take in the dimensions of this gigantic structure. With a height of about 30 meters, a length of nearly 300 meters, and a width of over 200 meters at its base, it is a truly colossal creation. Its construction was a monumental task that required millions of baskets full of earth over many generations, a testament to the incredible organizational ability and collective labor of the Cahokians. On its summit likely stood a massive temple or the residence of the supreme leader, from which one had a wide view over the entire city and its surroundings. Cahokia, however, was much more than just Monk's Mound. The city included hundreds of smaller mounds, including platform mounds on which houses and other buildings stood, as well as round and conical burial mounds. The city was carefully planned, with large plazas used for ceremonial gatherings and markets. A massive palisade of thousands of logs surrounded the central urban area, suggesting a need for protection or demarcation. At its peak, Cahokia housed an estimated 20,000 people, with tens of thousands more in the surrounding settlements. This was a complex society with a distinct social hierarchy and specialized artisans. Archaeological finds show that the Cahokians maintained a far-reaching trade network that included shells from the Gulf of Mexico, copper from the Great Lakes, and chert, a type of flint, from distant sources. They were skilled farmers who grew corn in the fertile floodplains, but also hunters and gatherers. Interestingly, the Cahokians also built so-called wood henges, circles of large wooden posts that probably served as astronomical calendars to mark the solstices and equinoxes. This demonstrates a deep understanding of celestial movements and their importance for agricultural planning and religious rituals. Like many other great civilizations of the past, Cahokia also experienced a decline. After 1200 AD, the population began to shrink, and the city was finally abandoned around 1400 AD. Here, too, the reasons are complex. Possible environmental problems such as deforestation and overuse of resources, internal conflicts, or social unrest leading to decentralization and migration. The exact causes remain a fascinating mystery that invites us to reflect on the fragility and constant change of human societies. As we review these impressive cultures, from the enigmatic lines of the Nazca to the imposing mounds of Cahokia, from the artistic vessels of the Moche to the rock-hewn cities of the ancestral Puebloans, we recognize the immense diversity and ingenuity of human civilizations in the Americas. Each of these cultures mastered challenges in its own way, created knowledge, and left behind a rich cultural heritage that inspires us to this day. With these images and thoughts in our hearts, we can slowly prepare for the journey to the next wonders that the ancient world of the Americas has yet to reveal. The night is still young for our stories, and many more fascinating discoveries await us. Chapter 7: Agriculture and Innovation. Breathe gently in and out. Let us pause for a moment in our journey through time and turn our gaze to the earth, to the fertile soil that formed the foundation for the great civilizations of the Americas. For before the first pyramids were built, the first observatories erected, and the first complex scripts developed, there was a quiet but profound revolution, a revolution in the fields. It was the patient and wise cultivation of plants, a millennia-long dialogue between humans and nature that made everything that followed possible. Imagine a small, inconspicuous grass growing in the warm valleys of present-day Mexico. It is called teosinte. Its ears are small, hard, and bear only a few kernels. It's hard to believe that this wild grass is the ancestor of one of humanity's most important crops, corn. About 9,000 years ago, people began to gather the seeds of this grass. But they didn't just collect them indiscriminately. With keen observation and a deep connection to nature, they selected the plants whose kernels were a little larger, a little softer, or a little more numerous. Year after year, generation after generation, this process was repeated. It was not conscious genetic modification in the modern sense, but an intuitive breeding, a whispering with the land. The farmers selected the best seeds from the harvest to sow again in the next cycle. Slowly, over thousands of years, the plant changed. The hard husks became softer, the number of kernel rows increased, and the cobs grew into the lush form we are familiar with today. This transformation, recorded in the plant's genetic code, is a living testament to the patience and foresight of these early agricultural societies. Corn became not just a source of food, it became the center of their culture, the flesh of the gods, and the symbol of life itself. But corn rarely stood alone in the field. The farmers developed an ingenious system known today as Three Sisters agriculture. Imagine a field where three plants live together in perfect harmony, supporting each other. First, the corn is planted. As its sturdy stalks grow tall, they provide a natural trellis for the next sister, the bean. The bean plants twine up the corn stalks, reaching for the light and stabilizing the corn in strong winds. But their most important gift lies hidden in the earth. On their roots live small nodules of bacteria that fix nitrogen from the air and enrich the soil. Nitrogen is an essential nutrient that corn desperately needs for its growth. Thus, the bean nourishes the corn that gives it support. And then the third sister is added, the squash. With its large, broad leaves, it spreads out on the ground, covering the earth like a protective blanket. This canopy provides shade, keeps the soil moist, and suppresses the growth of weeds that could compete with the young plants. Its prickly vines also deter some pests. Together, these three plants formed a self-sustaining ecosystem. They created a symbiosis that kept the soil fertile, maximized yields, and ensured a balanced diet. The corn provided carbohydrates, The beans provided protein, and the squash provided vitamins and minerals. It was a system of such elegance and efficiency that it spread across the entire continent and ensured the survival of countless communities. Let us now gently turn our attention and travel to the airy heights of the Andes. Here, in a harsh environment where oxygen is scarce and the nights are freezing, the Andean peoples accomplished another agricultural miracle. They tamed the wild potato. Imagine the steep, rocky slopes of the Andes. To practice agriculture in this vertical world, the Inca and their predecessors created impressive terraced fields, the Andins. They cut steps into the mountains, supported them with stone walls, and filled them with fertile soil. These terraces not only prevented soil erosion, they also created microclimates. The temperature on a lower terrace could be significantly different from that on an upper one, allowing for the cultivation of different varieties. Coupled with sophisticated irrigation systems that channeled meltwater from the glaciers over miles of canals to the fields, they transformed barren mountain slopes into blooming gardens. In these gardens, the incredible diversity of the potato unfolded. Over millennia, the Andean peoples bred more than 4,000 different varieties. There were potatoes for every conceivable altitude, from the temperate valleys up to 4,500 meters. There were varieties that were frost-resistant, others that thrived in dry soil. They came in all colors and shapes: red, blue, yellow, purple, oblong, round, gnarled. This diversity was their insurance against crop failure. If a disease struck one variety or the climate changed, there were always other varieties that survived. The Inca also developed an ingenious method of preservation to prepare for the harsh winters and periods of drought. They made chuno, freeze-dried potatoes. After the harvest, the potatoes were spread on the ground and exposed to the freezing night temperatures of the high plateau. During the day, the sun melted the ice, and people stepped on the potatoes with their bare feet to press out the water, similar to pressing grapes for wine. This process was repeated for several days until the potatoes were small, dry, and rock-hard. In this state, chuno could be stored for years, even decades. It was light, easy to transport, and a concentrated source of food for traveling armies, officials, and the people in times of need. A simple but brilliant technology, born from observing the natural cycles of frost and sun. Besides the potato, the Andean peoples also cultivated another superfood, quinoa. This small grain, now prized worldwide for its high nutritional value, was a staple food in the Andes. It is extremely resilient, grows even at high altitudes and in poor soils, and provides a complete protein, all the essential amino acids the human body needs. For the Inca, quinoa was sacred, the mother of all grains. Let us return for one last moment to the warmer, more humid lowland regions of Central America, the home of the Maya and Aztecs. Here grew another plant of inestimable value, the cacao tree. Cacao beans were so valuable that they were used as currency. For a handful of beans, one could buy a tomato or a squash. It was money that grew on trees. But cacao was more than just a means of payment. It was a sacred drink, reserved for the elite, for priests and warriors, and consumed during important rituals and ceremonies. Imagine a frothy, bitter drink, often spiced with chili, vanilla, or other spices. It was not a sweet treat as we know it today, but a fortifying, spiritual elixir intended to establish a connection with the world of the gods. The domestication of these plants, corn, beans, squash, potatoes, quinoa, tomatoes, cacao, and many others, was the foundation upon which the complex societies of the Americas were built. It was the result of millennia of patient observation, careful selection, and hard work. These agricultural innovations created food surpluses that allowed a portion of the population to devote themselves to other tasks, building temples, studying the stars, developing art, and writing. This deep connection to the earth and its gifts shaped not only their diets, but their entire worldview, their calendars, and the structure of their societies. It was the heartbeat that made the life of these ancient civilizations beat to the rhythm of sowing and reaping. And this rhythm quietly echoes to this day. Chapter 8: Art, Architecture, and Craftsmanship. Let us now gently turn our attention away from the grand systems of trade and agriculture and toward the quieter, but no less powerful, expressions of the ancient American cultures. We immerse ourselves in the world of art, architecture, and craftsmanship, a world where the human mind, hands, and heart worked in harmonious concert to create beauty and meaning. Imagine a world without iron tools, without the wheel for transport, and without the power of draft animals like horses or oxen. In such a world, one might think monumental structures would be impossible. Yet the peoples of the Americas prove us wrong in a way that still leaves us in silent awe. If you visit the Andes in your mind, the home of the Inca, you see before your inner eye walls that do not seem to be made by human hands. The fortress of Sacsayhuaman above Cusco is one such wonder. Gigantic, irregularly shaped stone blocks, some as heavy as dozens of elephants, are fitted together with unimaginable precision. There are no straight lines, no right angles. Yet each stone fits its neighbors so perfectly that not even the blade of a knife can slide into the joints. How is this possible? It was the result of patience, community, and a deep understanding of material and balance. Thousands of workers moved these colossi over long distances. They used ramps of earth and stone, levers of wood, and ropes of plant fibers. Imagine the sound. Not the loud crash of machines, but the rhythmic chanting of the workers, the creaking of wood, the slow, grinding sound of stone on stone. It was a process that may have taken decades, a meditation in stone, where every movement was carefully planned and executed. These walls were not just protective structures. They were an expression of cosmic balance, a connection between the strength of the mountains and the order of human community. Inca architecture is a dialogue with the landscape, nestling against the mountains and blending into the environment as if it had always been there. While some hands moved mountains of stone, others worked with an equally admirable devotion on creations of incredible delicacy. Let us travel from the macroscopic world of architecture to the microscopic world of textile art. The peoples of the Andes, in particular, long before the Inca, were masters of weaving. The Paracas culture, which lived on the arid coast of modern-day Peru, created some of the finest textiles the world has ever seen. Their tombs, preserved by the dry desert air, have left us colorful fabrics that still glow after more than 2,000 years. Imagine a weaver sitting in the dim light of a simple house. Their fingers, skilled through countless hours, move with an almost dance-like ease. The threads, spun from the wool of alpacas and vicuñas or from cotton, are as fine as spiderwebs. The colors are a feast for the eyes. Deep indigo, vibrant red from the cochineal insect, warm yellow and rich brown from plants and minerals. With these threads, they did not just weave fabrics. They wove images, stories, and belief systems. Flying shamans, mythical creatures with predator heads and bird bodies, complex geometric patterns representing the cosmos. The technical mastery is breathtaking. Some Paracas textiles have a density of up to 500 threads per square inch. This is a fineness that is barely achievable even with modern machines, and here it was created entirely by hand. Each of these fabrics was a precious commodity, more valuable than gold, worn for a lifetime and finally given to the deceased as a protective cloak for the journey to the other world. And yet, there was also gold, but its value was different from today's. It was not a means of payment, but the essence of the sun, the tears of the sun god Inti. Its color and its imperishable shine made it sacred. The goldsmiths of the Chimu culture on the northern coast of Peru were true masters in working this metal. They mastered techniques such as hammering, lost wax casting, soldering, and gilding. They created ritual masks with calm, sublime faces, goblets for ceremonies, jewelry that tinkled softly with every movement, and entire garments of gold plates that looked like liquid fire in the sunlight. Even more mysterious is the legend of El Dorado, which originated with the Muisca people in the highlands of modern-day Colombia. Let us linger for a moment on the shores of the sacred lake Guatavita. The air is cool and thin. The water's surface lies like a dark mirror reflecting the sky. Once a year, so the story goes, a sacred ceremony took place here. The new ruler was covered with sticky resin and then dusted with the finest gold powder until he himself looked like a living statue of pure gold. On a richly decorated raft, laden with gold and emerald offerings, he rode to the middle of the lake. In the silence of dawn, he jumped into the water, washing the gold from his body, while his priests sank the precious offerings into the unfathomable depths of the lake. It was not an act of loss, but an act of giving, a way to renew the cosmic order and honor the gods. The famous golden raft that archaeologists have found is a tiny but incredibly detailed model of this ceremony, a silent witness to this deep spiritual belief. But the palette of treasures was far broader. For the Olmecs and the Maya in Mesoamerica, jade was the most precious substance of all. Harder than steel, its working was an immense challenge that could only be overcome with sand and patience. Its cool, green color, reminiscent of young corn plants and life-giving water, made it a symbol of life, fertility, and eternity. Imagine an Olmec axe made of jade, so smooth and perfectly polished that it feels like silk, or a Maya death mask, composed of hundreds of small pieces of jade, intended to preserve the face of a ruler for eternity. These objects were not just jewelry, they were containers for the soul. Another material, dark and mysterious, was obsidian. This volcanic glass, which forms sharper edges when broken than a modern scalpel, was of inestimable practical and ritual value. It was used to make blades for weapons and tools, but also polished mirrors that were believed to be portals to the spirit world. To look into one was like looking into another reality, a dark, reflective depth where the future could be revealed. And then there was perhaps the most ephemeral and at the same time most dazzling art form, feather mosaics. In the Aztec Empire, the feathers of the quetzal bird, whose long, emerald green tail feathers shone metallically in the light, were more valuable than any precious metal. Specialized artisans, the Amantica, collected feathers from countless birds and sorted them by color and size. With incredible precision, they glued these tiny feathers one by one onto cloth or agave paper. They thus created luminous images of gods, shields for warriors, and magnificent cloaks for the rulers. Imagine an Aztec emperor wrapped in such a feather cloak. With every movement, the colors seem to flow and shimmer. The image of a hummingbird or a snake seems to come alive. It was an art as light as the air, a captured rainbow that symbolized the ruler's connection to the divine sphere of birds and the sky. From the massive, earthbound stone sculptures of the Olmecs, huge heads with full lips and thoughtful eyes that were perhaps portraits of powerful rulers, to the fine, almost weightless lines of the Nazca geoglyphs, which can only be seen as a whole from the air, we see an infinite variety of expression. Each culture found its own language in stone, clay, fiber, metal, and feathers. They did not create art for art's sake, as we understand it today. Every object, whether a simple clay bowl or a royal gold mask, was imbued with meaning and purpose. It was a part of life, a part of belief, a thread in the great tapestry of the cosmos. As we now slowly leave this world of craftsmanship and beauty behind, we feel the deep heritage that lives on in these objects. They tell us of a sense of patience that has become almost foreign to us today, of a deep connection to nature, and of an understanding of the universe that found expression in every detail of life. These silent masterpieces are an invitation to look more closely, to listen to the stories they whisper to us across time, and to honor human creativity in all its forms. And so we slowly prepare to continue our journey into other realms of these fascinating civilizations. Chapter 9: Religion, Cosmology, and Ritual. Take a deep breath and let the sounds of your world fade into the background for a moment. We are now embarking on a journey not through physical landscapes, but through the invisible realms of faith, myth, and the deep spiritual convictions that formed the heart of the ancient American civilizations. Imagine a world where every mountain, every river, and every star has a soul, a world where the gods whisper with the wind and speak in the patterns of corn cobs. The spiritual landscapes of the Americas were as diverse as their geographical ones. From the misty Andean peaks to the humid jungles of Mesoamerica, people shared a fundamental understanding. The universe was a living, breathing organism, and humanity was just one thread in its vast, complex fabric. These religions were deeply polytheistic, meaning that a multitude of deities shaped existence. But these gods were rarely distant, abstract beings. They were the embodiments of nature itself, the sun that gives life, the rain that nourishes the harvest, the jaguar that symbolizes the power of the night, and the earth, which, as a benevolent mother, supports all living things. Let us begin our journey in the heart of Mesoamerica, where one of the most fascinating and enduring deities was worshipped. Imagine you are standing on the summit of a pyramid in Teotihuacan or Tenochtitlan. The air is cool, and below you stretches a city of stone and light. In the sky, you see the brilliant feathers of a quetzal bird, and on the earth, a snake slithers through the tall grass. In the imagination of the Aztecs, Maya, and other peoples, these two beings merged into a single, powerful deity. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. Quetzalcoatl was a god of duality. His feathers connected him to the sky, the wind, the breath of life, and knowledge. His serpent form rooted him in the earth, in water, and in the cyclical renewal of life, of shedding skin and being reborn. He was not a war god, but a culture bringer. Legends tell that he gave humans the calendar, the art of writing, the secrets of astronomy, and above all, corn, the sacred plant that was the foundation of their civilization. His worship was a veneration of knowledge, creativity, and hope. Reliefs on temple walls show his winding body, adorned with precious green feathers, a symbol of the harmonious connection between heaven and earth, spirit and matter. His whisper, it was believed, was the wind that swept across the fields, carrying the secrets of the universe with it. Now let us travel further south, high into the thin, clear air of the Andes, into the realm of the Inca. Here, where the sky seems within reach, the most important deities were to be found in the firmament. Let your imagination dwell for a moment on Inti, the sun god. For the Inca, Inti was not just a distant, glowing sphere. He was the divine ancestor, the father of the first Inca emperor, and his warmth was the source of all life and all power. The gold that adorned the temples and palaces was not seen as a sign of material wealth, but as the sweat of the sun, solidified tears or fragments of the god himself on earth. Every year at the winter solstice, the great festival of Inti Raymi was held, a magnificent ritual to celebrate the return of the sun and the lengthening of the days, and to ask for his favor for the coming year. At Inti's side stood Mama Quilla, the moon goddess, his sister and consort. While the sun ruled the day, Mama Quilla watched over the night. Imagine the silver nights in the Andes, where the moonlight bathes the snow-capped peaks in a magical glow. Mama Quilla was the patroness of women and the mistress of the calendar. Her cycles determined the time for sowing and harvesting and marked the rhythm of religious festivals. Silver, which was considered the tears of the moon, was dedicated to her. Inti and Mama Quilla represented the cosmic duality that permeated all Inca thought: male and female, day and night, gold and silver. Together, they ensured the balance of the world. But the ancient cosmologies knew not only the world of humans and the realms of the gods above, they also knew the worlds below. In the humid lowlands of the Maya Peninsula, the earth was riddled with a network of underground rivers and caves. These limestone sinkholes filled with crystal-clear water, the cenotes, were considered sacred portals to another dimension, Xibalba, the underworld. Xibalba was not simply a hell of punishment. It was a place of trial, transformation, and transition. The sacred text of the Maya, the Popol Vuh, describes the mythical journey of the hero twins through the treacherous realms of Xibalba, where they had to face the cunning lords of death. Imagine looking into the still, dark water of a cenote. You see not only your reflection, but you feel the presence of another world lying just beneath your feet. For the Maya, death was not a final stop, but the beginning of a perilous journey, at the end of which could be rebirth in a new form. The sun itself, it was believed, had to travel through Xibalba every night to be reborn on the eastern horizon the next morning. This complex understanding of the cosmos required intermediaries, people who could bridge the gap between the material and spiritual worlds. This role was filled by shamans and priests. They were the keepers of the sacred calendars, the interpreters of divine omens, and the leaders of the rituals that maintained cosmic balance. A ritual was more than just a prayer. It was a performance, a sacred drama that brought the myths to life. Imagine a plaza filled with the rhythmic sound of drums made from wood and animal skins, the gentle lament of flutes made from bone or clay, and the rattling of dried gourds. Dancers, adorned with feathers, jade, and the skins of sacred animals, moved in precise, symbolic patterns that mimicked the movement of the stars or the creation of the world. Sacrifices were made, sometimes precious goods like corn, textiles, or incense, but in some cultures and on certain occasions, also the most precious commodity of all, life itself, to nourish the gods and renew the life force of the universe. To communicate directly with spirits and gods, shamans in many regions, especially in the Amazon basin, use psychoactive plants. This was not done for pleasure, but in a strictly controlled, sacred context. One of the best-known substances is ayahuasca, a brew made from two different plants, known as the vine of the soul. Imagine a shaman leading a circle of people in the silence of the night. The bitter drink is served in small bowls. The purpose of this ceremony is not to escape from reality, but to dive deeper into the hidden reality of the spirit. It was believed that the plant lifted the veil between worlds, allowing the soul to travel to find healing for illnesses, to foresee the future, or to speak directly with ancestors and nature spirits. It was an inner journey, guided by the shaman's song, the Icaro, which served as a thread to lead the soul safely through the visions and back again. Thus, spiritual life in the ancient Americas was an uninterrupted dialogue between humanity and the cosmos. Every sunrise was a confirmation of the divine cycle, every raindrop a gift, every dream a potential message. Belief was not a separate category of life. It was life itself, woven into the way one grew corn, the way one built a house, and the way one understood the course of the stars in the night sky. These deep spiritual roots, this sense of connection with all that exists, nourished the societies, inspired their art, and gave their existence a profound meaning. From this foundation grew the structure of their daily lives, an order that we will calmly consider on our further journey as we delve even deeper into the world of the ancient civilizations of the Americas. Chapter 10: Contact and Downfall. Breathe deeply in and out. Let the sounds of the world around you slowly fade away. We are now traveling to a turning point in time, to a moment that changed everything. Our journey takes us to the shores of a world that had flourished in relative isolation for millennia. Imagine the warm, sun-drenched shores of the Caribbean, the gentle lapping of the waves, the chirping of insects in the dense green. In the year 1492 of our count, strange objects approached the horizon. To the Taino, the inhabitants of these islands, they were floating mountains with huge, white wings. They had never seen anything like it before. They were the caravels of Christopher Columbus, driven by a wind that propelled not only sails, but also the destiny of two worlds. The first contact was marked by curiosity and wonder. The newcomers looked strange, with their light skin, beards, and odd, shiny clothing of metal. They spoke an incomprehensible language and carried staffs that spat fire and thunder. But the initial fascination soon gave way to a deep and tragic disillusionment. This encounter was the harbinger of a wave that would break over the entire American double continent. A few years later, in 1519, another, far more determined expedition landed on the coast of modern-day Mexico. Led by Hernán Cortés, these men brought not only curiosity, but an insatiable hunger, the hunger for gold, glory, and the spread of their faith. They entered the realm of the Aztecs, a civilization of incredible complexity and splendor, whose capital Tenochtitlan, built on an island in Lake Texcoco, was larger and more magnificent than most European cities of that time. Let us pause for a moment at this contrast. Imagine the conquistadors as they first look over the pass and see the vast city below them, with its floating gardens, the massive temple pyramids, and the countless canoes that crisscross the waterways like a teeming picture. A sight of almost unreal beauty. But in the eyes of the Spanish, all was mixed with strategic calculation. They saw wealth to be conquered and a culture they considered pagan and inferior. The technological gap between the two worlds was immense and would prove to be decisive. The peoples of the Americas had achieved mastery in architecture, agriculture, and astronomy, but their military technology was different. Their sharpest blades were made of obsidian, volcanic glass that could be sharpened to be more acute than a scalpel, but was fragile against the steel of Spanish armor and swords. The Aztecs fought in colorful armor of cotton and feathers, which protected against the arrows and spears of their traditional enemies, but were effortlessly pierced by a bullet from an arquebus. And then there were the horses. These animals, extinct in the Americas since the last ice age, were a source of terror and awe for the Aztecs and later the Inca. An armored rider seemed like a monstrous, invincible unit of man and beast, charging with thundering hooves through the ranks of foot soldiers. The noise and smoke of the firearms, though inaccurate and slow to reload, had an enormous psychological effect. They seemed to channel the power of the gods themselves, the thunder of the heavens in the hands of men. But the deadliest weapon the Europeans brought was invisible. It traveled in their breath, on their skin, in their blood. It was the pathogens against which the peoples of the Old World had developed some immunity over centuries, but which were completely new to the isolated populations of the Americas. Smallpox, measles, influenza, typhus, they spread like an invisible fire. Imagine the desperation. A disease breaks out that no one knows. It begins with high fever and pain. Then terrible pustules appear all over the body. The healers and shamans, who had known and treated the diseases of their people for generations, were faced with a mystery. Their rituals, their herbs, their prayers, nothing helped. The disease not only killed, it shattered the fabric of society. Entire families died within days. Villages became ghost towns. There were no longer enough healthy people to care for the sick, bury the dead, or tend the fields. Faith in the gods and the rulers who were supposed to protect them eroded. It is estimated that in the decades following the first contact, up to 90% of the indigenous population succumbed to these imported plagues. A demographic collapse of unimaginable proportions which weakened the civilizations far more than any battle. In the midst of this chaos, the conquistadors pushed into the heart of the empires. In 1521, after a long and brutal siege, the magnificent city of Tenochtitlan fell. The smallpox epidemic that raged in the city during the siege had already carried off its defenders by the thousands. The canals turned red, and the once proud capital of the Aztecs became a field of ruins. Further south, in the dizzying heights of the Andes, the tragedy repeated itself. The Inca Empire, a masterpiece of organization and engineering that stretched for thousands of kilometers, was weakened by a civil war when Francisco Pizarro and his small band of adventurers arrived in 1532. Here, too, smallpox was already raging, having preceded them overland and even killed the previous Inca ruler. Pizarro masterfully exploited the internal conflicts. In one of the most audacious and treacherous acts in history, he captured the Inca ruler Atahualpa during a supposedly peaceful meeting. Atahualpa offered a ransom of unimaginable value. He promised to fill a large room once with gold and twice with silver. The Spanish accepted the offer. Golden statues, jewelry, and ritual objects of inestimable cultural value were brought from the temples and palaces and melted down to be shipped to Europe. After the ransom was paid, Atahualpa was nevertheless executed. The loss of their godlike ruler paralyzed the empire, and in 1533 the capital, Cusco, fell into the hands of the Spanish. The downfall was not only military and political, but also cultural. The conquistadors' greed for gold was insatiable. Temples were plundered, sacred sites desecrated. At the same time, the priests who accompanied the conquerors tried to eradicate the pagan religions. Thousands of codices, the elaborate folding books of the Maya and Aztecs that contained their knowledge of history, astronomy, religion, and genealogy, were burned on huge pyres. Imagine the knowledge of centuries, the voices of poets, priests, and historians, going up in smoke. Only a handful of these irreplaceable treasures survive the fire and today give us just a tiny glimpse into the spiritual world of these civilizations. It was an attempt to erase an entire culture from the memory of humanity. But the spirit of resistance did not die out immediately. Although the great empires had fallen, many peoples continued to fight. In the inaccessible mountain regions of Vilcabamba, a last Inca state, a so-called Neo-Inca state, held out for almost 40 more years. From this fortress, they waged a guerrilla war against the Spanish occupiers, a last desperate stand against the unstoppable tide. It was not until 1572 that the last Inca ruler, Tupac Amaru, was captured and executed. With his death, the last organized bastion of indigenous resistance at an imperial level ended. The ancient civilizations of the Americas had fallen. Their cities lay in ruins or were built over by new, colonial cities. Their political structures were shattered, their populations decimated, their cultural heritage burned and melted down. A world had come to an end, but under the ashes, embers still glowed. The descendants of the Maya, the Aztecs, the Inca, and many other peoples survived. They adapted, hid their traditions, mixed them with the faith of the conquerors, and thus preserved fragments of their identity over the centuries. The ancient languages are still spoken in many parts of the Americas today, the old myths retold in new forms. The downfall was complete, but the extinction was not. And so this chapter ends not in complete darkness, but in the twilight of a new, painful age, whose echoes resonate to this day, and whose stories are far from being fully told. OUTRO, the legacy of the ancient civilizations. Our journey through time is drawing to a close for today. We have wandered through dense jungles to marvel at the colossal stone heads of the Olmecs. We have climbed the steep steps of the Mayan pyramids and looked up at the sky, just as their astronomers did so long ago. We have traversed the floating gardens of Tenochtitlan and scaled the dizzying heights of Machu Picchu. But the end of our journey is not the end of their stories. For these civilizations have not truly disappeared. Their legacy lives, breathes, and surrounds us in ways that are often subtle, yet profound. Imagine you are listening to the sounds of a market in the Peruvian Andes. The language you hear there might be Quechua, the language of the Inca. It is still spoken by millions of people today, a living link to a vast empire. In the villages of Mexico and Guatemala, the words of the Maya live on. More than 10 million people still speak one of the many Mayan languages today, preserving in them the knowledge, poetry, and worldview of their ancestors. And Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs, has not fallen silent either. In its sounds, the memory of a proud and complex culture resonates. These languages are more than just means of communication. They are archives of memory, filled with the stories of creation, the knowledge of medicinal plants, and the rhythms of the cosmos. But the legacy is also carved in stone. The majestic ruins we have visited, Teotihuacan, Tikal, Machu Picchu, are now protected as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. They attract people from all over the world who stand in awe before the engineering skill and aesthetic sense of their builders. When you stand before the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan today, you feel the same energy that pilgrims felt 2,000 years ago. When you let your gaze wander over the mist-shrouded peaks of Machu Picchu, you understand why this place was considered sacred. These sites are not dead monuments. They are places of reflection, where the past merges with the present in an almost tangible way. Perhaps the most everyday, yet most amazing, legacy is what we find on our plates. Imagine the immense importance of corn, domesticated from a simple grass by the early peoples of Mesoamerica, and now one of the most important food sources in the world. Think of the potato, cultivated in thousands of varieties in the Andes, which saved entire civilizations in Europe from starvation. Tomatoes, cacao, avocados, chiles. All these gifts of the Americas have changed the world's cuisines forever. Every time we use one of these ingredients, we unwittingly connect to a millennia-old agricultural tradition, a deep understanding of the cycles of sowing and reaping. And finally, there are the people, the descendants of the Maya, the Inca, the Aztecs, and many other peoples still live in their ancestral lands today. They weave textiles with the patterns of their ancestors. They celebrate festivals that combine ancient rituals with new traditions, and they fight for the preservation of their culture and their environment. They are the living guardians of the heritage, proving that a culture does not die as long as its stories are told and its traditions are lived. The scientific world is only slowly beginning to appreciate the full extent of the achievements of these civilizations. Archaeological discoveries continue unabated. Every newly discovered tomb, every deciphered inscription adds another piece to our puzzle, revealing a world of astonishing complexity and depth. The precise calendars, the complex mathematics, the sustainable agriculture, all of this inspires researchers and thinkers today. As these thoughts slowly come to rest, feel the deep connection that unites us all with this distant past. The legacy of the ancient civilizations of the Americas is not a closed chapter in a history book. It is a quiet but constant melody that continues to sound in the rushing of the wind over the Andean peaks, in the bustling activity of the markets, and in the taste of our daily food. Perhaps now is the moment to gently close your eyes and let the echoes of these ancient worlds resonate in your dreams. Let the images of the stone faces, the sunlit temples, and the green terraced fields pass before your inner eye. The journey for today is over. Sleep well and dream sweetly. More journeys into the past and to distant places already await you.